Game time, we diving deep. From the stairs to the play, no time for sleep. Below the surface, we're working, we set the scene. Who's your host? Scott Levine. Below the surface.
Welcome back to Below the Surface. This is where stats meet strategy. I'm Scott, your host, and this is episode 12. After missing last week, we're back with a loaded Week 5 slate. But before we dive into football, quick little detour. This isn't a baseball show, but shout out to the New York Yankees. I'm rocking the jersey today after that wild card win. Cam Schlittler getting it done and knocking out those stinky Boston Red Sox. Back to football. Joining me again is my brother Matt, three-time fantasy champ, trade assassin, and probably one of the toughest matchups in the league. If you caught our Week 3 episodes, you already know Matt brings the insight and the banter to the table. And speaking of trades, I tried to get cute this past week, trading away Ricky Pearsall and J.K. Dobbins for Ladd McConkey, who was playing my New York Football Giants. I really thought he had a great matchup, but boy, was that a disaster. He backfired and only put up 2 points. Meanwhile, Matt's been wheeling and dealing like always. He flipped Jordan Love and Isaiah Bond for Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, Bill as we love to call him, to a QB-needy manager in our league. I just lost Lamar Jackson. I know Love's on bye, but he'll be out multiple weeks. And then he also pulled off another trade, flipping a 1-for-1 Devontae Smith for T. Higgins. Just classic Matt moves. Matt, you want to give your insights behind the trades and let the audience know your thoughts?
Yeah, for Devontae Smith for T. Higgins, I was just taking a shot on the upside that they can get the offense fixed. I don't really like what I'm seeing from Philadelphia. I think they're going to be up in a lot of games, and I'm hoping that the Cincinnati Bengals can either get it together with Browning, or I thought they might make a QB change. Not that way at this point, but we'll see if he has another bad week. And as for Bill, I saw another man in my league put a bid on Isaiah Bond. I was able to outbid him, secure him. He also needed a quarterback. Bill, I knew he was pretty low on him, but I still think there's opportunity with Eckler down for the season, a pretty ambiguous backfield, and now Terry's banged up, so I think there's a path for him still, so figured I might as well buy low.
Yeah, not bad. We'll see how those moves affect Matt's teams going forward. But today, guys, we're rolling out something new. Along with our fantasy analysis, we're going to be giving game predictions and betting props for every single matchup this week. And Week 5 is stacked, like I said, so there's going to be some debate along the way. And with that being said, let's dive in. All right, let's peel back the curtain and go below the surface with our deep dive picks of the week. The bets and plays we like best from the entire slate. Starting off with our 9:30 game, we're staying overseas and the Vikings taking on the Browns. I'm going to start with the Browns, who just decided to make a big decision, benching their starting quarterback Joe Flacco for a rookie quarterback. And I have to bring up Shedeur Sanders, who of course gets himself back in the media with the pantomiming to the media reporters and not even talking. Really interesting decision by him, and we'll see if he actually ever sees the field this season. But back to the players actually playing in this game. I think Isaiah Bond, who Matt just traded away, is a low-key guy to keep your eye on. That's because he just had one of his best games, and he's a rookie coming in with a rookie, and he was the highest graded wide receiver per PFF last week. Also, Cedric Tillman will be missing time this week. He's going to have to step up in that regard. On the Viking side of the ball, they just come off a game where Carson Wentz accumulated a ton of yardage late last week against the Steelers, who have a brand new secondary this year. And Jordan Addison came back and made some big plays late in the game, but it was just a little bit too late. They will be missing 3 offensive linemen this week. We'll see if he's able to find some holes behind the backup O-line. For the game, my prediction, I'm staying with the Vikings. I picked them last week and they let me down, but this game is personally a stay away. Some props that I like personally are Quinshon Judkins over 75.5 rushing yards and Harold Fannon's over 28.5 receiving yards. Matt, heading over to, what are your thoughts on this game and who you want to spotlight first?
My thoughts on the game is I'll take the Vikings, but yeah, they're going against a good defense, and I don't really trust that offense 100% with the O-line and Carson Wentz. And obviously you got Dylan Gabriel making his first start in a really adverse situation, not even home or away. You're in a weird spot in London, and you're obviously going against Brian Flores' defense, so I think he can struggle. but I do think he already hyped him up in his first presser. Jerry Jeudy will be a little dump off safety valve for him. He works that underneath pretty well. So 4 receptions should be a lock for that man.
Yes, sir. I like the 4 receptions call. Jerry Jeudy is a known veteran and will be relied on by a rookie quarterback. Moving into the next game, we're going to talk about the 2 teams that have significantly underperformed expectations, and that's the Baltimore Ravens and the Houston Texans. And these teams are both 1-3 at the moment. And we're going to start with the Ravens because they just have so many injuries on their side of the ball. Lamar exited last week down 17. He'll now potentially be missing the next 3 weeks. And hopefully he can be back at full strength heading into that Chicago matchup after their bye. Derrick Henry has really struggled all season long, except that one unbelievable week 1 game where we thought he was going to have another incredible season. The Ravens got away from the running game last week after he had a good first drive and a good carry. On the opening drive, he had a 14-yard rush. In the games that they win, Derrick Henry typically performs well, but the games they lose, he's typically not a very great fantasy option, so we'll have to keep an eye on that. But for the Texans, the guy I really want to spotlight is Woody Marks. We finally got the Woody Marks breakout game. He showed out with 21 touches and 27 fantasy points, able to score on the ground and through the air. And the rookie Jaden Higgins, I want to mention him because he got his first receiving touchdown, and Stroud had his probably best game of the season, and Nico Collins did what he did, still leading the team in yards. For this game, the prop that I'll shout out is Woody Marks over 18.5 receiving yards or Nico Collins touchdown. This is a poor Baltimore secondary that's banged up, and I'm just going to be hammering Woody Marks over receiving yards until it keeps going up. The money line, I'm not really feeling too strong on the side just because all the injuries and anything can happen with a team on the ropes like this. But I'm going to stay with the Texans for now.
Yeah, everything feels like the Texans in this one. Baltimore's just so banged up, like from top to bottom, offense and defensive side of the ball. Obviously, they're going to have to rely on Derrick Henry. He has struggled, but I still think he's looked good throughout stretches of the season. So he might be able to carry a win home, and I know Cooper Rush filled in for Dallas a couple years ago and held it down a little bit, but as we're seeing with Jake Browning, those short stints, you can't really trust them. And he's in a completely new spot a couple years later. I know Rashad Bateman was hyping him up a little bit, but I don't believe in that way. And I like Woody Marks again in a good spot. He showed his breakout last year. I was on him before the beginning of the season that he was going to take this job. Yeah. And now I like the rushing and the receiving because I think they might be up early. So
as you can tell, we're both a little lower on Nick Chubb, but if you have to play him,
about Nick Chubb.
Hope it sneaks into the end zone.
I saw a clip and it was him. It was one of his 2 touchdowns that they were celebrating, and one of the coaches was like, "That's your guy, D'Amico. That's your guy." So I just think they're all on the Woody train, and it's hard not to be.
Absolutely, love Woody Marks this week. That'll push us right into our next game. Another 2 teams that have just been filled with injuries all season long. I feel like that's been the story of this season, is the amount of injuries we've been seeing. I feel like we'd say that every year, but this year feels different. This game is the Dolphins versus the Panthers, and we'll start with the Dolphins, who just had a really big loss on their offensive side of the ball. Tyreek Hill, we saw that terrible injury, just his leg was such a terrible spot, and now they're gonna have to figure out a way to find guys to function without him. Darren Waller obviously stepped up in that game against the Jets with coming back and getting his 2 touchdowns. Darren Waller, man, what the heck?
We were high on him after the Giants playoff win back in the day. We thought he was that next year was gonna be the focal point of the offense. He tweaked his hammy before the season started, but even then he had some decent stretches. But obviously wasn't the guy we thought he could be. But he looked pretty good out there again. Zone monster in that game.
Yeah, red zone monster for sure. Yeah, I like the role that Mike McDaniel's been using him in. Like, he's not a blocker, and get him out in space and use him as a slot guy. But I did want to bring up Malik Washington for the Dolphins. He actually, when Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle missed, saw a big increase in design targets. He saw about 5 a game when one of them missed, and he's really good against cover 3, which the Panthers defense plays a lot of cover 3 defense. So keep an eye on him. I like his prop. But for the other side of the ball, the Carolina Panthers, they started the game hot last week. They scored a touchdown on the opening drive. Joey Sly really let them down. He mixed an extra point, missed a field goal, and then the game was over from there. They got absolutely slaughtered. Bryce got benched. We'll see how they can bounce back this week. The Dolphins tend to blitz at the 4th highest rate in the league, and Teteroa McMillan, his target share grows from 18% all the way up to 33% when he gets blitzed. I really like him this week as well. Some of the props that I want to give out were Malik Malik Washington over 31.5 receiving yards and Tedero McMillan's over 63.5 receiving yards. But for the money line pick, I'm going to go with the Dolphins in this one. I think Chuba Hubbard is a big loss. Even though Rico Dowdle had a huge year, shout out the Gamecocks. I'm a Gamecock alum, but I think that's going to be a big loss this week. All right, Matt, what do you think about this game and your pick for the week?
Yeah, I'm in on the Dolphins. I've liked what I've seen over the past week and a half, starting with the second half in the Bills games. Anthony Weaver, I like what he's done with the defense. He came out in the presser, says he likes to be violent. I always like that out of a defensive coordinator. I expect Devon to continue to even be more dominant without Tyreek Hill, and Waddle will probably take most of those first reads that Reek was getting. Yeah. And Malik Washington, I think he's looked good all year, so I think he can build on that. And it's a great spot for Tet. We saw Garrett Wilson score. We've seen Pittman score, Khalil Shakir, even Kayshon Boutte and Matt Collins both scored. So a lot of wide receivers getting in the end zone, and it feels like Tet's finally due for his first one, but you never know what you're going to get out of the Panthers on a week-to-week basis.
Yeah, Bryce Young is too inconsistent, even though I do really root for him as a player. All right, moving on, we'll head into the Raiders versus the Colts. This game might be one of the more higher scoring games on the slate. Daniel Jones last week had his first bad moments, starting the game with an interception and finishing the game with 2, but they really had a chance to win that game late, and unfortunately Adonai Mitchell had just a poor game. He had that fumble on that long catch right as he was about to cross the end zone, and then he also committed a holding penalty on that long Jonathan Taylor touchdown run. Really cost him that week. But in this week, they play a Raiders pass defense that is super susceptible to the play action pass, and that's what Daniel Jones has really excelled in this year. And the guy who's excelled the most from the play action pass has also been Tyler Warren, who's gotten like 70% of his yardage on the play action pass and maybe could be a good touchdown candidate in this game. But for the Colts defense side of the ball, they've also been allowing a lot of points to wide receivers as well, the second most to the slot. They literally just saw one of their wide receivers retire after playing Puka Nacua. I guess he can do that to you after he just put up that monster game, and he's just a monster this season. We didn't talk about him because he played yesterday, but Puka Nacua is a freaking tank. And then we have to mention the Raiders offense. We finally saw that Michael Myers stance from Genty.
Oh yeah, he finally looked like the Ashton Genty we saw at Boise State, which is nice to see. Hopefully he continue to build on that. The main thing for the Raiders right now is Brock Bowers, though. He said that he's expected to play, but he came out with a quote saying that he doesn't really feel like he can go full speed and separate the way he wants to. That's obviously something you don't want to hear out of an elite player on your offense like that. So they're going to probably focus in more on Genty, which could hurt the offense, but I think Bowers hasn't really been great this year as a whole, so they've probably already been doing that.
Yeah, I think Brock Bowers said like 2 more weeks and he'll be back at full swing.
It's just for this week.
Yeah, and also just to mention, over 50% of Genty's running attempts are coming on zone concepts, and the Colts have been pretty porous against the zone concepts rushing. So for the props, I like his over rushing yards, 65.5. And I know I didn't mention him at all, but Josh Downs, his over 33.5. Michael Pittman comes into this game. He didn't practice. He missed practice.
He's ready to go, they said.
With a hamstring, but he's ready to go. I wonder if he's used a bit as a decoy this week. And we obviously saw Adonai Mitchell maybe play himself a little bit out of favor, and Alec Pierce has been banged up this season.
Yeah, Alec Pierce is out.
Yeah, so Josh Downs, I like his over receiving yards, and like I mentioned, maybe sprinkle in a Tyler Warren touchdown.
Jonathan Taylor
but I'm
touchdown.
going to go with, Jonathan Taylor touchdown, Ashton Genty touchdown. I like the points in this game, over points. But I'm going to be contrarian and go against the public or just like the spread. And I'm going to go with the Raiders to pull up a big upset in this game. It's pretty large spread, and the Colts had a kind of high like leverage loss. So I like it.
It's a big test for the Colts to see if they're a real team or if they drop one to the Raiders here. They're just like, 2 straight losses. We don't really believe in you as much now.
And I do believe in the Raiders as a good team too as well.
I kind of believe in the Colts. I don't think they're a bad team. I can't say that. So.
Yeah, I do think that. I would be trying to trade for Colts players in fantasy as well. Whoever you're highest on in that offense, just make your pick and take a chance on one of them. I like what I've seen as well, yeah. Let's move into our hometown team, the New York Giants, going to Louisiana to take on the New Orleans Saints. And Jackson Dart, he made his home debut against the 3-0 Chargers, getting the dub, coming out firing in that opening drive, getting the first score of the game himself, running it in. But of course, heartbreak would soon strike. Good things never last. We lose Malik Neighbors, our superstar receiver, the guy we love watching the most. Matt, how do you feel about the Giants offense now that we lost Malik.
Yeah, Malik was my first round fantasy pick, so really hit home twice there. I know we saw the Giants go into New Orleans a couple of years ago and light it up with Eli and Odell in a shootout with Drew Brees, but I don't think that's what we're going to be seeing this week. Hopefully Dart and Scat can establish the run, but I just think it's going to be a stacked box. We're going to try and get like Wandale and Theo getting underneath, and if Dart can actually hit those crosser routes to Darius Slayton, and because he was mostly just looking to run in the first game, which I can't blame him because it's your first game without Malik Neighbors, but hopefully he can start to see and make some of those reads, and maybe you'll even see some deep Jalen Hyatt snaps. So he's got to be out there. Yeah, crash out season. But yeah, the best unit in this game should be the Giants defense, and that's what we're going to need to count on to get this win. So it's tough. It's a pick 'em game, and we're a dreadful offense on the road, but I do think our defense could carry us home.
Exactly.
Momentum riding high in the organization, hopefully.
Hopefully the rush hour gets after it. Hopefully that nickname sticks for our front four. But speaking of, I want to get to cover the Saints a little bit because the Giants run man and cover one at some of the highest rates in the league right now. We're working with small sample size because Spencer Rattler hasn't got many starts, but with Rashid Shaheed against man, he's been phenomenal. So I do Rashid Shaheed as a potential ladder play on his over receiving yards. And then that's not to say that Chris Olave isn't a strong option as well. He's been the most targets outside of Puka, I believe, and not considering like the players that played already this week. He's been the highest targeted player. And he also got in the end zone last week. They had a little unfortunate, like poor end to the game where they threw a bad trick play last week and they were keeping it close with the Bills. So I like what this offense has done. Also, I want to quickly shout out Kendre Miller, who's looked solid as well. But on the Giants side of the ball, Matt mentioned him, Darius Slayton. He's probably my favorite of the Giants wide receivers this week. Just feel like he's done the best when Malik Neighbors misses time. And last year, he was really phenomenal in the games Malik Neighbors missed. But for this game, like I said, I like the Rashid Shaheed ladder. And then my pick will be the New York Giants. Call it homer bias. And that takes us right into our next game. The Dallas Cowboys going into New York Jets at home. We'll start with the Dallas Cowboys, who had a heck of an impressive performance against the Green Bay Packers last week, spoiling Micah's revenge and finishing in a tie, of course. What the heck? A tie? Who would have thought that? 40 points for both teams. Absolute offensive explosion. No one really saw that one coming. But for Dallas this week, I'm really interested in Jake Ferguson. I expect George Pickens to be shadowed by Sauce Gardner, and even though he's been gotten a few times this season, I think he's one of the better coverage corners in the league still, and Jake Ferguson tends to absolutely eat against zone coverage and has been phenomenal in CeeDee Lamb's absence. But for the New York Jets on the other side of the ball, the Cowboys defense has not been good at all either. As I said, they gave up 40 points last week, and they're allowing the fourth most adjusted fantasy points to running backs. And Breece Hall is finally got the backfield touches to himself now, or at least more of them, with Braylon Allen now going to be missing a large chunk of the season, potentially the rest of the season. And they also have been really porous to zone concept runs, which Breece Hall is one of the best at. For me personally, I'm going to be rocking with Justin Fields against this Dallas Cowboys defense with Caleb Williams on bye. Just like I said, they're poor against the run. Justin Fields is one of the best rushing quarterbacks, and we saw what he did last week, bouncing outside and weaving through the defense, getting into the end zone and putting up a hell of a game. So yeah, my props will probably be Dak over 241.5 passing yards, Jake Ferguson over 41.5 receiving yards, and maybe even sprinkle in his touchdown. All right, Matt, where do you want to go first with this Dallas Jets potential shootout?
Yeah, you touched on a lot there, so there's only really one place that I want to cover, and that is my dark horse sleeper heading into the year, Jaden Blue. He's not too dark horse. He was getting a little news, at least early in the preseason cycle, but Dante Turpin already ruled out, and Miles Sanders is questionable, so there's an opportunity to pass. We saw him make the news today for the wrong reasons, wearing the wrong type of cleats and apparently getting blisters, but hopefully once he gets on the field, he can actually make some splash plays and maybe buy himself a little role in this offense so he's not a complete zero the whole year.
Yeah, and Garrett Wilson also, he might be a little bit worse this game because he's a little bit worse against zone-heavy concept defenses. That's the last bit of information I have for that game. Moving into the next game, let's go into the Broncos versus Eagles. And Matt, what are your thoughts on this struggling Eagles offense?
The offense is struggling, but I think you're going to want to get the receivers involved, but I just feel like this might not be the week for it. I think they're a better team than the Broncos. I think they can get out into an early lead, and the Broncos have been susceptible to the run defense. So Chase Brown went 4 yards a carry, even though they weren't able to do much on offense. And obviously we saw what Hampton and Taylor did the 2 weeks prior. So I think it could be a big week for Saquon for the first time this year and finally see that glimpse of what we saw last year.
Yeah, for Saquon Barkley, man, it's been really interesting. He's really been disappointing, failing to reach over 4 yards per carry once all season. Something only happened twice all season last year where he had his 2,000 yards. So we'll have to monitor him and see if this is just a slow start or something that is just going to be a problem all year. But Jalen Hurts, we got to mention last week with the passing attack. 0 completions in the second half. But they have been getting out unbelievable wins against great opponents, I think. They're 4-0 against really solid teams, and it's really been on the back of their special teams. They've been getting it done. A blocked punt for a touchdown, 2 blocked field goals the week before. So shout out to their special teams. But this game favors a very man-heavy scheme, and I know that Pat Surtain is most likely going to shadow A.J. Brown, but all it takes is one play. They call him Batman there. He's like a mini tank, and all it takes is one play. I like A.J. Brown to have a big play, maybe take his over longest catch or over 58.5 receiving yards. That's what I like. Also, on the other side of the ball, mention the Broncos real quick. I want to shout out a guy who I mentioned in our first episode we did together, Troy Franklin. He was non-existent, really, but in this matchup, the Eagles give up a lot of yards against the play-action pass, and that's where Troy Franklin has excelled most this season. With Quinyon Mitchell potentially shadowing Cortland Sutton, maybe there's opportunities for him to show out. I'm going to go with the Eagles as well in this one, too. Just at home. Got to go with the team that's rolling. Any last words about maybe the Broncos here or last few words here?
I guess we saw RJ Harvey start to do a little something, so that's something to keep an eye on.
Yeah, for sure. I like that call out. Let's move into our next game here, and that is the Titans versus the Cardinals. Now, just last week, the Cardinals almost came back in a thriller, but we're just short. But we saw Marvin Harrison finally have a big moment in the season this year. He looked like he got himself back on track, so hopefully he can carry that into this week. I don't really have a strong read on this game right now, especially with the loss of James Conner and Trey Benson. I'm not sure how this rushing attack is going to look, but I do like Kyler Murray over rushing yards in this game just to make things work with his legs with the loss of his other running backs. And on the other side of the ball, Cam Ward, he said it in the thing. What'd he say? We ass. So we'll have to see how the Titans can rebound from their 4-game skid. Both teams are on a bit of a skid right now. What are your thoughts on how these teams can overcome maybe some of their slow starts?
Yeah, I'm pretty convicted that the Cardinals are in a good bounce back spot here at home against the Titans. You really can't ask much better than that to get right. And I know they're missing James Conner and Trey Benson, but the Titans' run defense might just be dreadful enough where Michael Carter and DeMarcado, who are fine players, are able to get it done. Against Woody Marks, he obviously just broke out. JT, you give them some lenience there. He's arguably the best running back in the league this year. But even the first 2 weeks, the Rams and the Broncos had 150 yards rushing against them apiece. So they've just been getting torn up throughout the run game all season long. And then on top of that, the wide receiver ones have thrived against them too. For Marv, who hit his low point, but then we saw him bounce back with a couple catches and then a nice touchdown. We saw Sutton score against them. Devontae Adams scored. Pittman, those are all like big body receivers like Marvin Harrison, so maybe he can find the end zone again. And then as for the Titans, as much as they are ass, we get to see my boy Tajay Spears at least get a questionable tag this week, so that returns around the corner, if not this week. And Tony Pollard hasn't gotten that running start. I was in on Spears a lot to take the job before the season, but once he got hurt, I was in on Pollard. He hasn't done much with it, so maybe Spears can have a nice little burst the second half of the year.
Yeah, they could really use a spark on that offense. And Cam Ward, he struggled in the passing game, failing to clear like 200 yards most weeks. But with Calvin Ridley banged up, I do want to mention Alec Iamanor as a potential touchdown play or just like taking his props or a ladder on him. He's been targeted quite a bit, and maybe one game they'll connect on a big play because that seems to be his role for them. All right, let's move into a little bit more of an exciting matchup. These two teams are coming to this week 3-1, and that's the Tampa Bay Buccaneers taking on the Seattle Seahawks. And last week, the Buccaneers nearly rallied from behind, but the Bucky Irving fumble really killed all hope, and then they went down 18 last week. But Emeka Egbuka, man, he remains a star. And Godwin returned, but he wasn't used in the slot nearly as much as last year. Unfortunately, Bucky Irving is injured, but he played through it somehow last week and had that unbelievable touchdown catch. And then also Mike Evans is ruled out this week. So they'll be missing those two key offensive weapons, and that'll probably affect them. A nice little narrative for this week, though, Matt. Sam Darnold and Baker Mayfield, they were both in the same draft, top 3 picks, and they played together in Carolina before they found their footing in other places in better schemes. So it'll be interesting to see that narrative.
Yeah, I think it's going to be mostly on their shoulders because both these teams are really good against the run, specifically like against the run, not like in the running back dump offs. Like the Bucs have shut down Bijan and Saquon. Wasn't great rushing. He did get that touchdown on the tush push, but wasn't great yards per carry again. And Seattle's just about shut down everyone they've placed on the ground. Christian McCaffrey, Jalen Warren, and a bunch of other guys. And yeah, I do think that Rachaad White might be able to get his value through some dump offs. He's always been good at that. And
he's looked good this season.
He's looked good this season. So get him the ball. And Chris Godwin, there's not Bucky Irving. There's no Mike Evans. He's a safety blanket for Baker, and he got 10 targets last week. I don't know how, like 100%. I didn't get to watch that game much to see how he looked, but getting 10 targets, you earn those. So maybe he's on a better trajectory returning than could have thought.
Yeah, and I want to keep an eye on Seahawks corner Devon Witherspoon. The Seattle Seahawks play cover 4 and cover 6 at high rates, zone coverage a lot, and Baker likes to take deep shots against zone coverage, and that's benefited Emeka Egbuka, who's also been great against zone coverage as well this season. And then Sam Darnold, he's been so impressive this season, and top-graded passer by PFF, both in passing and under pressure as well. We'll have to see how that connection with JSN can continue to establish throughout the season. He made that big few plays late in last game after having a pretty quiet game last week. But in this game, I'm going to be rocking with Seattle money line due to all the Buccaneers injuries right now. And the props that I'm interested in is Sam Darnold over 224.5 passing yards and a Emeka Egbuka touchdown, just because it's just been happening so often. Just going to ride the wave. All right, that'll move us right into our next game, which is the Detroit Lions going to Cincinnati to take on the Bengals. And should there be a mercy rule imposed?
We might be able to keep this one short and sweet.
Yeah, this one might be a quick one. Obviously, Ra's been the guy you hoped, and I'm really targeting the guys on the ground. I really like both Jahmyr Gibbs and Monty to get in the end zone as a prop bet. But for a contrarian play, Jared Goff, he's been looking great this year, and the Bengals have been the second best fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks.
Yeah, I'm all over David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs. We saw Mason tear them up 2 weeks ago, and then we saw J.K. Dobbins and R.J. Harvey both look good last week. Harvey having one of his better games. Dobbins went over 100, so that tandem should have their way in a game that they're running away with from the start. Jake Browning, Zach Taylor said he has some faith in him, as I said earlier, but I don't see the reason to. Jamar Chase seems like he's lost that faith, and it just looks like a disaster in Cincinnati. Yeah. I don't know how they haven't spent like a 7th-round pick on a Jameis Winston, Kirk Cousins, Russell Wilson. The season's not lost. The Ravens are cooked. They still have another week to be able to do it. But I still think like next week, if you go and get Jameis and he actually is able to, maybe it's just the O-line and that's why. Yeah. But
the O-line's been definitely a mess. But
there's still time to turn it around if they could get it going.
Jamar Chase, he's been saying all the right things, but it just hasn't been looking good on the field, and he clearly is a little bit frustrated. Hopefully he can just take that frustration out against Terrion Arnold. He's been the worst secondary player for the Lions this year and giving up the most plays. They do put their team on an island a bit, but when you're playing the Bengals, it'll probably switch up a little bit, their defense. All right, let's get into this next game, which originally we thought might have been a really high-octane offensive battle, but now I'm not sure. And that's the Washington Commanders heading to Los Angeles to play the Chargers. So Jaden Daniels, he's coming back after missing his 2 weeks, and he's got a tough matchup against a really good defense. He's going to be missing Terry McLaurin and Noah Brown. The Chargers run a lot of zone, and the best players they have for zone beaters are Deebo Samuel and Zach Ertz, and they're typically better against outside receivers, and with Terry out, they're probably going to have a decoy receiver out there. I do Zach Ertz yards. I didn't see it out there on the books, but that's something I'm very interested in. And then also the Commanders are our top 3 run funnel right now. How do you feel about the Chargers heading into this game without Joe Alt, Matt?
Yeah, this is a huge spot for the Chargers, in my opinion. They're not only missing Joe Alt, but they obviously lost Slater early in the season, and Mekhi Becton might be out. But with all that being said, You're got one of the better quarterback coach duos in the league. We've been hyping Justin Herbert up forever, and we're finally waiting for something to get done. He started off strong this season. You don't want to lose all that momentum he's got. And I know you got the excuses, but we literally saw Mac Jones go out there with the C Team 49ers and absolutely cook one of the better teams and defenses in the league. So if you're that guy, you're that coach, you have a Marion Hampton, you have an elite receiver core, and this is a Commanders team. They've been good rushing the passer, which hurts the O-line, but they haven't looked great as a whole. And Jaden's first game back, this is a spot you got to win. The Chiefs are going to be right on your tail if you drop this, and that whole first month of the season that you built meant nothing. And everyone just, wow, it's the same old Chargers. You lost to the Giants. This is a big spot for them, in my opinion.
Yeah, this is definitely a big spot, and Jaden's first game back, we'll see how good his mobility is in this game and if the Chargers defense can take advantage of that. But I'm going to be going with the Chargers, just a must-win game, in my opinion, for their season to continue on the path that they hope their team can head to.
If you lose this game, people thought you were a contender, now you're just another team.
Exactly. All right, let's head into the Sunday night game now. The Patriots versus Bills divisional matchup. And Matt, I want to get your thoughts on this game. This is a huge game for both teams, honestly.
Yeah, my gut says I think the Patriots, I think they can cover.
Upset alert.
Not upset alert necessarily, but I think it's a good spot for them to cover. It's a big spot for Drake May in his young career, prime time in Highmark Stadium. The Bills haven't been playing like outstanding football outside of James Cook, who's been unbelievable. Josh Allen's obviously been good, but he hasn't really been filling up the stat sheet since that absolutely ridiculous week 1. And depending on what you think of the Ravens team, they haven't faced much competition, especially lately with the Dolphins, Jets, and Saints. They're going to be playing a team that's been playing good football, especially building on something last week. I think Vrabel could have them ready in this spot, and I like the way Drake Mays looks. Yeah. So I think it's a good spot. And the primetime games have been close. Obviously, you can't carry that from one game to the other, but
absolutely,
it's been a trend so far.
Yeah, for Buffalo, obviously, James Cook, like Matt mentioned, he continues his greatness this season, consistently reaching 20 fantasy points and is a clear top-tier RB who was mispriced all off-season due to his trade rumors and the contract disputes. The wide receiver room continues to be by committee, and Dalton Kincaid seems like he's making his way into a focal point role potentially. Maybe it's just running hot on touchdowns, but I like what he's been doing. For the Patriots, Drake May was able to rush in a score, and we finally saw Travion Henderson score, which was nice to finally see. And then Stephon Diggs returning back to Buffalo and rounding back into form after his ACL injury, reaching 100 yards. And he hit 7 targets despite May only having 17 passes. Maybe a sneaky touchdown pick. And a prop I'd like to go with is Travion Henderson over 28.5 rushing yards. He cleared this last week, and Buffalo has a pretty weak interior. So Travion to hit that. He reached that last week. But I also was nearly close to picking the Patriots, and I really think they could do it. You know what? I'm just going to go with the Patriots here. Shooting my shot. Patriots over Bills in a shocker, a Sunday night thriller. We'll take it.
Yes, sir. I like the bold call.
Yeah. And then finally, we're going to round it out with the last game of the slate, the Monday night. Kansas City Chiefs traveling to Jacksonville to take on the Jaguars. 2 heavyweight teams this year, it looks like early. But Chiefs, like I expected, took care of business. And Mahomes continued his dominance against superstar Lamar Jackson. He's now 6-1 against him. They had a great week, and getting Worthy back, he seemed to be a real missing link, huh?
Yeah, no doubt.
Matt has him in fantasy, and all you fantasy owners better get him in your lineup every week now going forward. We'll obviously see eventually going forward when they're all back at full strength, but Worthy, man, he looks like he would have been a superstar if he had not gotten hurt. And then we have to bring up the Jacksonville Jaguars defensive side of the ball. 9 interceptions, 13 turnovers under new defensive coordinator Anthony Campanile, who has just completely revamped this defense into an elite unit. And obviously, it's going to be a big tall task against a quarterback with a caliber of Patrick Mahomes. And I expect Patrick Mahomes to give them quite a good fight. But how do you feel about Patrick Mahomes taking on this vaunted secondary and just an elite takeaway team right now?
Yeah, they've definitely been elite at takeaways. They haven't played the toughest competition at quarterback at the same time. And when you're playing Patrick Mahomes, I'm not really too worried about the turnovers. I think he's going to take care of the ball. I know you said this is a battle of 2 heavyweights. All the Jags are the team with a 3-1 record. I think there's only one heavyweight in this game, and it's the Kansas City Chiefs.
Fair enough.
And there's not going to be a moment in this game where I think you're going to actually feel like Jacksonville has a chance of winning. I think Patrick Mahomes is officially back to MVP form, and all it took was Xavier Worthy getting back, and now He's had time to build chemistry with the Tyquan Thorntons
Yep.
and the other Marquise Brown. He obviously has Travis Kelce, who looked a lot better without all the focus. We even saw Brashard Smith. I think
Shout
he
out.
could turn into a little like Jerick McKinnon, and we saw their connection bloom a couple years ago. They don't even have Rashee Rice back, so once Patrick Mahomes has all their weapons, I think it's even going to go to another level. But yeah, MVP season all the way. Chiefs are back, never a doubt.
Yes, sir. I like the Chiefs a lot. They're my pick in this game for the win. But
I drafted Mahomes and Worthy stack. We
Yes,
saw it
sir.
last week, and I can't wait for it to develop.
But I do want to spend a little bit more time on this game and talk about the Jacksonville Jaguars offense, which hasn't exactly met expectations under Liam Cohen. Trevor Lawrence, he's failed to reach 225 passing yards in 3 or 4 starts this season, and despite that, the Jags are still 3-1. But Liam Cohen, he has been coming through on his excellent work with running backs. Last year, we obviously know what Bucky Irving turned into, and that Rashad White-Bucky Irving duo last year was unbelievable. And now Travis Etienne looking phenomenal on the ground. He had 21 touches, 125 scrimmage yards, got in the end zone again. Brenton Strange, he's looked good. He's been a great blocker and has been consistently getting on the field for them. The receivers have been really letting them down. It's Brian Thomas Jr. who's yet to break out, but I do like him in this game as a potential big play guy, and I'm going to be fading Travis Hunter going forward until he really shows something. Unfortunately, I was really high on him coming into this year, and he really hasn't shown anything solid.
Yeah, I was high on ETN coming into this year as my guy in that backfield to choose from, and once they moved away from Tank Bigsby, it felt great, but then it seemed like it started to shift to Tootin. But then last week, right back to it, you see the long touchdown run, so it's not like it's just this fluke. You see the big play potential that you're known that you want from him. So yeah, I think he could have a really good year this year.
Yeah, and then my picks we're going to go just all in on Xavier Worthy this week. I like his touchdown, his receptions, his over receiving yards, like all of that.
Let's finally connect on one of those deep balls. Tyquan Thornton's had enough.
Yes, exactly. And that'll wrap up the Week 5 slate breakdown. Really fun again to do this with you, Matt, and we'll see if any of our picks or predictions come true. Hopefully you guys pick the right ones and pair them up. I've been absolutely terrible with my bets pairing them. Unfortunately, it's a tough world we live in where we can't hit every bet we place. But that'll wrap up today's show, and we dove deep and went below the surface. And with that said, hopefully you guys enjoyed. I'm just going to have to, before we leave, ask you guys to hit that subscribe button, maybe even drop a comment. And we'll continue to keep these rolling each week and give you the best knowledge going forward for your fantasy matchups. With that said, thanks so much for all your support, and peace out.